Danielle awoke in the bathtub in the motel she was staying at. There were sharp items around the bathroom and spills of blood on the floor. She had been self-harming again and given up for the many times she tried. She got a towel and then looked herself in the mirror. She wiped some of the vapor and looked at her reflection. She looked awful. Her eyes were baggy and her skin was pale like a ghost. She took a deep breath and whacked the mirror with her hand, causing it to crack. Her palm was cut and she hastily bandaged it. She then went to the bed and rummaged through her rucksack. Little items such as a hairbrush, a compact mirror and a black leather wallet containing multiple $10 bills. She got dressed in her usual attire and decided to head onto the streets. She went to a diner, bought herself a coffee and sat in one of the corners looking around at the other customers around her. A father and his 2 kids were laughing and being playful at the table. An elderly couple smirking when they were eating and a mechanic smooshing with his girlfriend was waitressing at the diner. She looked at those with disdain. She was an outsider and was out of the social loops. She thought about her times at high school before the events that damaged her and then mentally shut them off. She left the diner and walked around looking through the store windows. She looked at one of the window's reflections and saw herself. She stared for a few minutes. She was invisible to society and was caught off guard when some of the people started to stare at her back. She quickly left the scene and walked on. That night Danielle was looking outside her motel room window watching the small amount of cars passing by. There's some lightning strikes in the distance and she was sure it wasn't forecasting storms at this time of night. Then the lightning became more closer and faster towards her view and before she knew it flashed in front of her. It made her jolt and duck down to the floor. When she got herself up and looked out of the window, a man in beige clothing was standing in the middle of the parking lot and was walking around in a circle. She was intrigued by this and decided to go down to check this random person out. She came outside and called him to get his attention. The man turned to her and slowly walked over. She asked if he okay and touched him slightly. Some of the lightning from him gave her an electric shock and quickly reacted to it. She asked who was he. The man said his name is Quo. Danielle thought it was an odd name given to him and curiously said to Quo if he needed a place to stay. Quo respectfully agreed to it and followed Danielle into the motel. When she came through the door she looked back and Quo disappeared. She then thought if she was hallucinating and looked outside her motel room door. He wasn't there and she turned back to her room. Quo appeared right in front of her. She screamed in alarm and Quo put his hands out trying to settle her. She did and asked who on earth is he? Is her an alien or some illusionist? Quo stepped back and then a pair of white feathered wings sprouted from his back. Danielle was shocked by the revelation and wondered if she had died. Was this person sending her to the afterlife? And Quo stately said that she's alive and well. She then slyly jokingly said barely and then asked why an angel had suddenly turned up in her life. Quo said he was placed on Earth in search of a location where his loved one is waiting for him to be reunited and needs a guide for him. Danielle asked why doesn't he fly over to where needs to go and Quo says his power of flight was disabled. He looks around and notices her belongings. He says she's a drifter and wonders if she's looking for a purpose. She says she's getting away from her past that corrupted her and traveling forward is the only way. Quo curiously asked why and she swiftly tried to change the subject. She entered the bathroom and locked her door behind her. She was getting tense and reached a small razor. Started to slice her wrist, then Quo popped his head from the door like a ghost and quickly reacted to what was going on. He leaped in and grabbed hold of Danielle's wrist. She then saw visions of blue skies with clouds floating fast, a newborn baby being born and a couple dancing in a field of flowers with an orangey sunset in the background. She gasped for breath and looked at Quo. He had powers that she couldn't fathom and he then stroked her hair in comfort. The next morning Danielle got up and noticed Quo had disappeared again. She looked around for him and looked above the ceiling. He was lying upside down with his arms spread out. She called him saying is he sleeping and he woke up, saying he was getting some rest before the journey. Danielle was still unsure if she was up for it and Quo hovered down saying she might get a kick out of it. Might broaden her mind and maybe just maybe come to the conclusion that life is worth living for. Danielle turned away from him and thought about it. She said she'll do it and join him on this journey. Outside the parking lot was a car that had various tickets on its windshield. Quo asked if Danielle can drive. She replied can he drive at all. Quo demonstrated by sticking his hand through one of the windows. It was transparent and then asked her again to take the wheel. Danielle couldn't open the car door so she broke into it by using her elbow and managed to hotwire the engine. Quo was in the passenger seat and the two were about to set off when she asked where they going. Quo placed his index finger on her forehead and transferred the location they were headed to inside her mind. She blinked rapidly and the location came to her. North Dakota. They set off and left Illinois behind. They traveled along the highway. A while later Quo looked at one of Danielle's exposed wrists while she was holding the wheel and asked why is she harming herself. She didn't want to talk about it. Quo then started saying terms out. Family issues, heartbreak, drug addiction, the list went on. Danielle started getting techie and pulled over on a lay-by. She insisted that she didn't want to go through therapy, especially with an angel. Quo understood this, but it was something on his mind that he wanted to know about and politely said he's going to psychically enter her mind. Danielle was retorted against this, thinking he's going to wipe her mind and change her personality as part of interest. Quo said he hasn't got that absolute power and he's only trying to find the source for her insecurities. She continued to refuse. Quo then said fine but tricked her and got hold her cranium. She screamed and got noticed by a passing family in an RV. They thought she was getting strangled by a hitchhiker and proceeded to find a phone to call the police. Quo was seeing visions of Danielle's life in Ohio, her and friends and family. It wasn't all roses and lovely stuff. Her father was an unemployed alcoholic who on occasion would beat Danielle as he pleased because she was an only child. Her mother was an exotic dancer living the life of excess, but it was only to escape the clutches of her husband, and then the memories turned an ex-boyfriend of hers, a member of a street gang who would involve Danielle in situations she was most uncomfortable with and what he saw was most disturbing. Introducing her to smoking spliffs, then crack cocaine, which he'll forcefully made her inhale as way of taste testing before selling to junkies. Beating up a disabled boy named Gregor who Danielle looked out for in her high school years and shouting names like crippled and spastic. Quo turned to the one that shook Danielle to her core and how she ended up the way she is now. Her ex forced her on a mattress in some rundown apartment and proceeded to have sex with her. She pleaded to him to stop, but he continued. He wanted this and then quickly penetrated her. She let out a feeble gasp and just let him have it. Quo quickly fled out of Danielle's mind and saw what demons she was facing. Danielle broke down, tearing up and then head-butted the steering wheel. A police motorcycle came up next to the car and asked the two to get of the car. Quo popped out and approached the police officer. The officer presented with a pair of handcuffs. He said he was attacking this poor girl in the car and was going to be arrested. Quo quickly grappled the officer and psychically linked to his mind. Quo pulled back quickly. The officer was hiding a sinister burden, and that being shooting an innocent child while on duty. The officer then opened up saying it was 10 or 15 years ago. He get nightmares from that day and wished he could apologize to the family, but he couldn't. He couldn't own up to it and had this hanging over the rest of his life. Quo said maybe the time is right to do it when he's ready to own up for that mistake and come clean rather than hiding in a pile of lies. Quo quickly returned to the car and told Danielle to drive. She said no and then Quo whacked the dashboard. Suddenly the car set off quickly on its own. Danielle clamped onto the steering wheel and managed to control the car. The officer looked on as the car went off in the distance and thought about what he'll say to the family when he returns. As they drove on, they entered a forest area and Danielle told Quo stop using his supernatural powers to get out of situations. Quo only said he was trying to get over these oncoming obstacles that were interrupting his journey. Danielle turned to him and starting to yell at him. Suddenly there was a large bump and Danielle quickly stopped the car. They both went out and saw a deer lying in the middle of the road. Danielle felt guilty about it. Quo walked over to it and kneeled down by its side. He touched its neck and closed his eyes. Then the deer started to raise its head and got up to its legs. Its wounds were fading away and was becoming energetic. Quo had brought it back to life and then returned back to Danielle. He told her that creatures like the deer have a second chance to live if a miracle turns up out the blue, and Danielle sort of agreed to it. He then started wobble like his legs were made of jelly and instructed her to return back to the car. They were getting nearer to the location that he needs to be and Danielle assists him back to the car. They drive off while the deer watches and quickly turns away from the roadside. They reached their endpoint and Quo said to Danielle that need to go on foot for the remaining journey. She accepted this and followed him across some barren greenery. The two reached a stone monument on top of a hill. Ancient stones that had been around for centuries, and Quo walked up onto it. The stones had strange markings on them and Danielle looked on as Quo raised his head to the sky. Grey clouds parted and a then ray of sunlight shined onto the stones, then onto Quo. His wings spread out massively and called out to the sky that he is ready to depart. A body wrapped in white floated down and landed in front of him. He kneeled and looked on at what was his lover. He told Danielle to come over and looked over Quo. He said to the body that Danielle helped him to make it here and that they'll be reunited. He then asked Danielle to touch it. She was a bit pensive, but he gently brought her hand and placed it on the body. She then saw visions of Quo and his lover's life before they were tragically killed in a road accident involving their motorcycle and a drunken man who behind the wheel of a 18-wheeled truck. Danielle jolted back and watched as Quo picked up the body. He said thank you to her and then started to flap his wings. Danielle looked up as Quo floated up in the sky and disappeared into the sunlight. It then disappeared and the gray returned, pouring out rain. Danielle headed back to the car. The problem was she couldn't start it, even hot wiring it didn't work. The car's engine was dead and so she had to walk on foot. She stuck her thumb out to hitchhike for a ride and then looked at her scars on her arm. She then thought about the experience she had helping Quo reunite with his loved one and knew she can change her life around. She smiled in the breeze and walked off to where she can begin a fresh start, away from trauma, away from harm and away from near death. She carried on walking with her thumb still sticking out, hoping to find that ride.
Love is but a song we sing, here's the way we die. We can make the mountains ring or make the angels cry. Though the bird is on the wing, we may not know why. Come on, people, now, smile on your brother. Everybody get together, try to love one another right now. Some may come and some may go, we will surely pass. When the one that left us here returns for us at last, we are but a moment's sunlight, and we're fading in the grass. Come on, people, now, smile on your brother. Everybody get together, try to love one another right now. Come on, people, now, smile on your brother. Everybody get together, try to love one another right now. If you hear the song I sing, you will understand. Listen. You hold the key to love and feel, all in your trembling hand. Just one key unlocks them both. Don't you know it's there at your command? Come on, people, now, smile on your brother. Everybody get together, try to love one another right now. I said, come on, people, now, smile on your brother. Everybody get together, try to love one another people now, smile on your brother. Everybody get together, try to